Hello, this is Robert Quigley to talk about writing for online publications for J310 Fabulous. So how is writing online different from writing in print? Well, obviously you have to get to the point a lot quicker. There is just not as much attention span from people when they're looking at stuff online as there is when they're reading something in print. So you can't really back into a story. Don't take forever to get to the nut graph. You need to put it right up there in the lead or the second paragraph at most. So you have to think about SEO and SMO. SEO is search engine optimization, which means making sure that your content can be found easily and high up on Google's search engine. So you have to make sure that there are keywords that people would search for in the top part of your story. You don't want to overdo this, but you do have to be aware of that. Because things are online and that's the way a lot of people are going to find your information, you cannot ignore that. It's also very important that your headlines have keywords in the headlines themselves. You also have to think about SMO, which is social media optimization. And that means making sure that your headlines are tweetable, basically. You can provide context with links, which is completely different than what you could do in print. So a reader looking at a story can actually click on something and learn more about it. And as you've probably done before, you can get sucked through the vortex of clicking on link after link and finding out all kinds of information. That's how the internet works, and that's how we want it to work in our stories as well. And people do expect a rich media environment and some interactivity. You can't just have a static story anymore. You have to have something that brings more depth to your stories. And aggregation, which means going out and finding useful information and putting it together in one place for people, is a very useful skill. There are people who are hired just as aggregators. And the reason is because there's obviously just so much content out there. So people who are good at finding good things and compiling it are very useful. And the news is much more immediate, even compared to TV news, which can break in at any point and show breaking news. Online is just so much quicker because everybody has their smartphones with them. It pops up as an alert. Right away you can find out what's going on in the world. You need to get there quickly, okay? So less fluff and more stuff. Here's an example. No more howdy, folks. The iconic Big Tex, a talking mechanical 52-foot cowboy who has watched over the State Fair of Texas since the early 1950s, caught on fire on Friday morning in what officials say was an electric fire and quickly burnt to a crisp. That's nice writing, but it's a little wordy. Instead, think of something like this. Big Tex, the beloved 52-foot cowboy who has watched over the State Fair of Texas for decades, caught fire Friday and quickly burnt to a crisp. That way you get right to the point, and it has all the important keywords still in there. So are you SEO or SMO friendly? Here's how you can find out. Make sure you get those important keywords right into the lead. That's what Google looks for. You don't want to be awkward about it. You don't want to just make it so it doesn't make a complete sentence and doesn't read well. However, you really should think about it. So don't beat around the bush about what you're talking about. Definitely write a good headline. And writers are creating their own headlines these days. It used to be you would have a copy editor behind you or a producer behind you who would write headlines for you. Now it's you. And so you have to write good headlines. They have to be catchy. They have to make people want to click on it. But they also have to have the right keywords in there so that Google will pick them up. Of course, you don't want to overdo it because good writing is still important. And this is a reporting class and this is a journalism school and we want good writing. However, you just have to keep these things in mind. And for social media optimization, do you have a way for people to easily share your content? So if you're working at that first job and you're looking at your stories that you're posting online and there's no easy share button to Twitter and Facebook, you should talk to somebody because that is the way that you get your content out there. And your headlines need to be short. So aim for 120 characters or less. And this is kind of weird because we're used to online having all the space you want. In print, you got to keep things short to fit in columns. On TV, you got to keep things short to fit in segments. But with online, you can write whatever you want. However, to make them social media friendly, you want to have them pretty short so people can just take that headline that you have and either just hit the retweet button or hit the Facebook share button, or they could just copy and paste it. So you want to make sure it's nice and short for them so that it's very tweetable. The link economy is different, so now you can actually put links, and of course this has been around for quite a while. However, it's still not being used by media organizations very well. This is from a blog. I had a hard time finding a good example in traditional mainstream media because they're just not very good at it. So when you have this thing about antibiotics and you could say a new report out of the Johns Hopkins Center, of course you're going to still report it the way you'd normally report it, but you also have a link to the report itself. or a link to the Alliance for the Prudent Use of Antibiotics, or the 2010 study by the FDA. So you want to make sure you have this context for people so they can get more out of your story. Don't be afraid that people are going to leave your story and not come back. If you provide this for them, they will still come back. People expect interactivity out of the web now. Let's take a look at snowfall. So the New York Times really started something with the snowfall interactive. You've probably seen this before, but the idea being that you can have a more interactive experience as you're going through a story. This is a really well-written story, but it's also full of really interesting photos, graphics, and it plays like almost like a TV show or a movie as you're going through it, because everything changes as you scroll down. It makes it a lot more interesting for the reader, and readers are starting to expect this now. These are expensive and they're hard to make. However, it should give you an idea that, this is the kind of thing that's being expected out of the media as we move forward. And so we can't just put a static story up there and expect that to be good enough. Okay, so I'm going to break down the anatomy of breaking news. Let's say something really big happened, like a plane crash in the city that you're working at. What you need to do first is write one sentence. This will be used for alerts, for tweets, that kind of thing. So get what you know into one sentence and get it over to your web producers as fast as you can and tell them what's coming. Make sure it's still accurate, make sure it's still attributed correctly, because it's still better to be right than just be fast. However, you also have to be fast. So you want to post that one sentence and anything else you have, or anything else you can get, into your organization's CMS. A CMS is a content management system. That way there's actually a link that people can go to on your site. I think you should get that one sentence out first, even before you have anything posted on your site, just because you want to have that news. But you want to do this as quickly as possible. It's almost like a 1-2, as fast as you can steps right here. Now, if you're social media friendly, which you should be, you want to check Twitter and see what's going on, and you want to ask for help. There's nothing wrong with going to the crowd and saying, hey, look, there's breaking news going on. What do you know about it? Then you want to add to your story, and sometimes just one sentence at a time. So as you're getting the latest news out of that plane crash, that there are 120 people on board, that there are survivors, whatever it may be, the location exactly of where it is, who owns the property, any damage on the ground, all those kinds of things you want to add as you go. However, you've already published at this point, so you're just publishing and updating from here on out. And of course, you could add timestamps to it as you go. You want to revise as you go. So if you have something new and better to say, you can revise and edit, and you can change your content as you go. Now, if you make an error, you want to be very transparent about that. So you want to put at the top, earlier we said this and it was incorrect. Sometimes you're going to want to just add new information to the top of old information as you go, but at some point you're going to want to rewrite that into a coherent story online. And you can turn your tweets into blog posts and those blog posts into stories. That is the way that reporters who are basically have to do it all these days have to operate. Your tweets are pretty much your notes. However, at least you're doing two things at once. You're being social and you're taking notes. You should check Facebook for info on the subjects of your news. So if somebody's arrested, you could go into Facebook's open graph search, which is really great. It's a little creepy, but for journalists, it's fantastic because you can look up somebody, you can find out who they're connected to, what they like, what schools they went to. All that kind of information is pretty much out there. People can lock down their profiles to where you won't see anything, but more often than not, you can at least find something out about people. I suggest taking screen grabs right away too, because if it's somebody who's been arrested, law enforcement will figure it out at some point and they're going to take down the Facebook page. So grab what you can when you can. Create a Google map. Super easy to create a Google map. All you have to do is be signed in to Google and you hit My Maps and then create a map. You can drop pins on a map, you can put information on there, you could then embed that on your website or into your blog. Make sure to include reaction from the crowd. So during breaking news, everybody experiences this together now. It's not like it's just coming from your newsroom and being shuttled out to everybody. Instead, everybody is writing about what they're seeing. Everybody's tweeting about their thoughts on it. You're getting pictures from the scene. You're getting video. So make sure you take all that reaction from the crowd and all that content and do something with it on your website. All right, you want to verify information. This is key. So it's better to be slow and right than fast and wrong. You don't want to get the wrong person arrested. You don't want to say the wrong person's dead. Be very, very careful. So this is a tightrope balancing act because you want to be very, very fast with breaking news, but you want to make sure you're not doing it wrong. And we have many great examples in the past of people doing it wrong because they're just trying to be so fast with it. We're all going to make errors. It's on you to be as careful as possible while still being quick.